Hello there and welcome along to the horseracing.net preview of Sunday's Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe at Longchamp. Now this is the most prestigious middle distance race in Europe and it's a significant renewal this year because Enable is bidding to become the first three-time winner of the Arc under Frankie Dettori. Now you will remember that she was thwarted in that last year by Waldgeist. She was caught in the shadows of the post, but she arrives here in pretty good form. She's stayed in training as a 6-year-old. It has been her sole aim all season, but she's been productive in the meantime. She was second, of course, in the Coral Eclipse at Sandown. She then became the first three-time winner of the King George at Ascot and was a bloodless winner of the September Stakes at Kempton last time. People will tell you that this isn't the strongest renewal of the Arc that we'll ever see, and they would be right. Certainly, this isn't a high-class field, the sort of high-class field that we could have expected had the likes of Magical, Gaeth, Pile Driver, to name just a few, have shown up. None more so than Love as well. She was declared a non-runner on Thursday on account of the going. So in terms of the form, Enable is the one to beat, even though she's probably a few pounds below the level that we're used to as a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. She's still been showing high-class form, and if she repeats the performance at Ascot, she'll be very, very difficult to beat here. The ground, as I said, is the reason why Love isn't here. It's very soft at the time of recording with more rain forecast. Could be heavy come Sunday. It's going to be very, very testing at Longchamp. And while that's not ideal for Enable, John Gosden has said so much. She did run in it last year. It was similar conditions and she was second. And my instinct is that she will handle it about as well as anyone else in the field. She has handled cutting the ground in the past. I don't think it will be a problem. I don't think it will be the reason that she's beaten. But she does set the standard, but I think 11-8 is too short. I think there's enough variables here in play that we'll get to be worth taking her on at that sort of price. I don't think she's worth backing at all at 11-8 for all that she is the most likely winner. History's against her, of course. No 6-year-old has ever won the Arc. Nobody's ever won the Arc 3 times. Trev and Enable can tell you how difficult that feat is. So yeah, at 11-8, I wouldn't be going near it personally. The biggest threat in the betting is her stablemate, that's Stradivarius, the star stayer, and you can see the logic for people wanting to back him. If you think back to 2016 and 2017, Order of St George, another Ascot Gold Cup winner, hit the frame on 2 occasions. He was 3rd and 4th, and in theory, in a real bog, a real test of stamina, you want a star stayer. Stradivarius will no doubt get the trip. Stamina isn't an issue with him. And he has shown he's got the speed as well for middle distances. If you go back to June, he was a fine 3rd in the Coronation Cup at Newmarket. And he was 2nd in the Prix last month, the Arc Trial. The form he's shown is good. It's very smart. He's a capable performer, but it's short of what you'd expect from an average Arc winner. He's a high-class stayer. He's probably a very smart middle-distance performer. I think 9-2 is far too short, especially when you take into consideration as well that soft going doesn't really suit Stradivarius. He is a stayer, but he's suited by fast going. So very testing conditions aren't likely to play into his hands. He's got Olivier Pellier on board, which is a great booking, a great replacement for Frankie Dettori. But for me, 9-2 is far too short for Stradivarius. Third favourite is Suttsas, 7-1, 3rd in this race last year. There's plenty of reasons to fancy him. He was an excellent 3rd in similar going, over course and distance 12 months ago. And he was a 3-year-old last year. In theory, he's going to be a lot older, wiser and stronger this time as a 4-year-old. What I'd say about him is he perhaps hasn't quite shown that progression from 3 to 4 that you'd hope for. He's raced 4 times this season. He's won once. He won a Group 1 contest at Chantilly in June. That was the Prix Gannet, but he's also disappointed. He was beaten at Longchamp in May, and he was a disappointing 4th in the Irish Champion last time. What I would say is with him, he represents a shrewd trainer, a master trainer in Jean-Claude Rouget, who's still bidding to win this race. Very experienced handler. There's every reason to think that he's been trained with this in mind. This will be his first start of the season, over 1.5 miles. It's reasonable to think that he could take a step forward for that. He did shape pretty well at Leopardstown, but he's going to need more, and about 7-1. I think there's others with similar profiles that make more appeal at the prices. So Suttsas, I think he's got a very solid chance at 7s. He's probably going to need a career best here, but if he runs to the same level that he did 12 months ago, he's every chance of serving it up to Enable. Next in the market, we have Insweep and Mogul at 10-1 and 12-1. They were first and second in the Grand Prix de Paris last time out over the Arc course and distance. And it's quite curious here because Insweep is a shorter price than Mogul, even though he was beaten 2.5 lengths. That could be because he's more unexposed. He's only had 4 starts so far, and he stayed on eye-catchingly well in the Grand Prix de Paris last time. He was caught back further than ideal, stayed on very strongly, and although he was firmly held by Mogul, he was making lots of ground at the finish. That sort of suggests that this sort of testing conditions will suit him. He's got form in soft conditions as well. Form-wise, he's going to need a big old step up, but he's 3. He receives weight from his older rivals. He's from the home guard as well. That's probably why he's so popular in the betting. In theory, he's open to more improvement, but what I would say about Insweep is he's going to need it, and about 10-1, I'd very much rather go for other runners. Which brings me to Mogul, who I think is a good each-way bet at 12-1. Now, he certainly has let down punters on more than one occasion this season, disappointed at Royal Ascot, never really got into things at Epsom, disappointed in the Great Voltigeur. But the thing about Mogul that I would say is he definitely gets this trip. He does strike me as one who has plenty of stamina reserves in the tank. He was a leading fancy for the St. Leger for much of this season before really bowing out of things at York. But largely, I think he's a very smart performer. He ran all the way to the line at Goodwood in the Gordon Stakes, the Group 3 contest back in July, and took a real step forward at Longchamp last time, I thought, in the Grand Prix de Paris. I was really taken by that. I was impressed by his style of running and the way he was able to kick away from the field. He's going to get a lead here from Sovereign, I'd say, most likely. We'll speak about Serpentine in a minute. But I imagine with Mogul, they'll aim to sit him prominently and really, in the style of Enable, kick on. I think he's dangerous. I think he'll handle the going. I think this test of stamina will play into his hands. At about 12-1, I think he's a really good bet to hit the frame. Whether or not he can serve it up to Enable, well, he's going to need a career best. He's going to need to find a good few pounds, but he's receiving weight from that older rival. He's receiving weight from as a 3-year-old. So Ryan Moore is booked as well. He looks to me like the Aidan O'Brien first string. I think he's very dangerous if given the right sort of ride and everything pans out well at about 12-1. And another O'Brien runner, as mentioned, is Serpentine, the Epsom Derby winner, and he could be a real fly in the ointment here tactically. As you remember, he was a devastating winner of the Derby, blew the field apart. That form hasn't worked out brilliantly, but it was a very smart performance. And you know, we've only seen him once since. He's highly unexposed. He came into the Epsom Derby as an unknown quantity, burst onto the scene and then had 71 days off the track. He came back in the Grand Prix de Paris and he was 4th behind Mogul and Insweep. I thought he shaped very well that day. He was handed a different ride under Christophe Soumillon. He was a bit more prominent rather than completely away like a scolded cat. He shaped as though he was a horse that would come on for that run massively after 71 days. He was prominent. He went for home and just didn't quite have enough in the tank, but he wasn't beaten that far, 4.25 lengths, so he's entitled to come on for that. On the form, he doesn't have an awful lot to find with Enable if you trust the figure of his Derby win. He's receiving weight as well for an Enable. I reckon he'll be given a ride that's more prominent, similar to the Grand Prix de Paris. He's going to be dangerous. The question marks with him are over the ground. He's not faced anything like this before. So about 11-1, he's an interesting type, but I prefer Mogul at the prices and just in general. Then we'll quickly touch on 2 French challengers as well. You've got Rabiha, the 3-year-old filly, and Persian King, the 4-year-old colt. Now, Persian King is, on the form, a very dangerous challenger to Enable. He's a high-class miler. He won the Prix de Moulin, a red-hot renewal of the Prix de Moulin here over a mile last month. Beat the likes of Pinatubo, Circus Maximus, Shishkin, Victor Ladorum, Roman Eyes. Beat them all fair and square. That's form not to be scoffed at. The thing with Persian King is he's stepping up markedly in trip here. He's never raced over further than 10 furlongs, a mile and a quarter. The way he races suggests to me that he's just a non-stayer. He's not going to stay this trip. It is worth noting that he represents Andre Fabre, the master trainer, 8 winners in the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe during his career. But for me, just can't fancy him at 16-1. I just don't think he'll stay in conditions that are really, really difficult. And then with Rabaha, you've got an unexposed filly here. She's shown some smart form so far. She was fourth in the Prix de Diane French Oaks back in July. She then followed that up by winning the Group 3 Prix de Psyche at Deauville over 10 furlongs, and then was stepped up to this course and distance for the first time in the Prix Vermeil for fillies and mares over course and distance last month. She ran well. She was beaten 3 lengths by Tanawa. She doesn't come here, Tanawa. The way she shaped Rabaha was pretty impressive. She took a long time to get going that day. She showed signs of inexperience, signs of greenness. But once she got into full gear, she showed the sort of performance that she could be capable of. On the bare form, she's got something to find, but she's going to receive a lot of weight as a 3-year-old filly. She's massively unexposed for the Jean-Claude Rouget team. This ground is going to ask something different of her, but she's certainly in the unexposed bracket, and at about 12-1, there's worse bets than Rabaha. And last but not least, the last horse I'm going to touch on. I have mentioned Sovereign. I would say about him, last year's Irish Derby winner. I think he is the main pace angle here for the Aidan O'Brien team. He's the 41 outsider. I think he is the one who'll be ridden aggressively under Mikel Barcelona. And with that in mind, I think it could be worth giving one more chance to Japan. Now, he has disappointed so far this season in no uncertain terms. He was beaten at odds-on at Royal Ascot in the Prince of Wales. He was 6-4. Lord North beat him fair and square there. He was last of 3, beaten 16 lengths in the King George. He was 5th in the Irish Champion last time. In theory, it's difficult to fancy him, but he has shown glimpses of what he's capable of so far this season. His effort to finish 3rd, just a head behind Enable in the Eclipse, was a very good effort. And I thought he shaped well for a long way, actually, in the Irish Champion Stakes last time. He was right up amongst the principals in the final 2 furlongs. That, for me, was far too much of a test of speed for him. He bowed out in the closing stages, but what it will have done is brought him on fitness-wise. It would be no surprise if he was being trained with this in mind. And if you think back to last year, he ran an excellent race as a 3-year-old. He was 4th, beaten just 4 lengths by Waldgeist. He came to make his move on the outside. And on his peak form, Japan, the form he showed to win the international stakes, the form he showed to finish 4th here last year, he's got every chance of making his presence felt. His 2 of his best efforts so far have come at Longchamp. He won the Grand Prix de Paris last year over this course and distance. So there's every reason to think that there could be a performance at that level still left in Japan. He's certainly shown hints at it at times. The ground isn't ideal, but it isn't ideal for anybody. And, he produced that kind of effort in this sort of going last year. So at about 14-1, I think he's a really interesting each-way prospect. For all that you have to forgive an awful lot with him, Yutaka Take is booked. He's a highly capable rider. If he gets any bigger than 14s, I would certainly suggest a look at him. He's well worth an each-way bet for me. So, Enable's going to take all the beating, but at the prices, I would go for Mogul and Japan, but I imagine that Suttsas will be a real danger as well. So that was it. Anyway, that was our preview of the Prix de Triomphe. If you enjoyed that, please do like and subscribe. Keep an eye on what we're up to on Twitter as well, at horseracing_net. There's a full preview over on horseracing.net as well if you want to read my thoughts in more depth. We've also got a tip for every race on the ITV7 as well, so head over there and we will be back. Not next week, no video next week, the week after.